anyone will tell you that when you look at the current Conservative Party, it's very weird. It really, really is. I mean, you've got people like Dominic Cummings who, if you read his blogs, talked extensively about ending the Conservative Party. You've got numerous hard right wing Tories who were at one point the fringe of the party, but are now in control almost to a T, to a point that they aren't going to, care about anyone in the middle class, let alone the working class. As far as they're concerned, as long as they continue to keep elected, that will be fine. And you're going to see increasing, especially the new crop of Tory MPs, who are going to be increasingly worried about their re-electability, especially from what are the Labour heartlands, going to be very worried about their re-election chances. And this is when, as we mentioned before, not all Boris Johnson ain't going to be able to hand out all these prizes to help, get these people, over. So there will be discontent in the ranks in some way, shape or form. And, of course, having an 80-seat majority means that you really can't blame anyone else for your party's and your government's failures. Boris Johnson, if he wanted to tomorrow, could easily pass a furlough extension scheme program. No problem. He could do it very easily. He'd probably find support as well. He'd probably also help. Because there's thousands of other stuff. There's I can't remember his name now, but he's an economist. I can't remember. But he wrote. Again, I wish I could read it, but I read it. It was behind the Financial Times paywall now, so annoyingly I can't read it. But he wrote about what Johnson and especially Rishi Sunak should be doing to help mitigate so much of the redundancies and job losses. Again, like I say, Boris Johnson's New Deal is pathetic when you look at the numbers wise. When again he touted it as this is going to be good as Roosevelt's was for not Roosevelt. Was it Roosevelt? Yeah, Roosevelt's was for the USA as it was good for them. But you've got to remember, Roosevelt spent over 40% of America's GDP. Boris Johnson is only spending 0.2% of the UK's GDP. Because, as usual, the Tories don't like to spend money. But that is because, increasingly, the Tories are being captured by a very, very libertarian faction. And we're going to go over that today. So before we get into that, please do remember to like, share and subscribe to the video. And of course, down below there are links to Patreon and other things that you can help support the channel in that way, should you like. So, this comes from The Guardian, and it's why Boris Johnson Tories fell for a tiny sect of libertarian provocateurs. So much seems unusual about this Conservative government. Its constant disruptiveness, its preference for rhetoric over functional policies, its mixture of brazen U-turns and cult-like discipline, its flirtations with far-right alongside left-wing sound plans to level up, its deadly reluctance to curtail small freedoms in a pandemic. It's a common attribute. It's common to attribute some or all of these tendencies to the idiosyncrasies of Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings, or the effects of Brexit, or the rise of right-wing populism. But there is a less noticed, far more surprising factor at work too. Today's Tory government has adopted some of the style and rhetoric and preoccupations of a defunct radical sect of Revolutionary Communist Party, or the RPC, or the CPR. The RCP was a tiny British party founded in the 70s and officially disbanded in the late 90s. Despite its name, most of its stances were not communist or revolutionary, but contrarian. It supported free speech for racists and nuclear power. It attacked environmentalism and the NHS. Its most constant impulse was to invoke an idealized working class and claim it was actually being harmed by the supposed elites of the liberal left. A similar impulse has also driven the Johnson government, in particular its Brexit policy and its decisive culture in last year's general elections and of Labour's Red Wall. This similarly is less surprising once you know that the former RCP member, Marina Mears, is head of Downing Street Policy Unit and probably Johnson's most important advisor after Cummings. An article for Grazia magazine this year, Johnson called her an extraordinarily ruthless one of the 5 women who would have shaped my life. On Friday, another RCP veteran, Claire Fox, was nominated for peerage by the government. Other RCP veterans, such as Frank Fedeli and Mark Hume and Brendan O'Neill, are fixtures of the Tory press and its associate journal, The Spectator. For decades, they've also organised the perversion of the most post-RCP organisations, including the magazine Living Marxism and the website Spiked, and the Institute of Ideas, now the Academy of Ideas, which runs political and cultural conferences and extensive corporate sponsorships and well-known participants. Journalists have paradoxically probed the methods and motives of ex-RCP networks. Much less attention has actually been paid to why the Tory party and the press have begun so keen on them. What does the scent of Marines and her comrades tell us about the modern conservatism? For a long time, Britain wasn't ready for the RCP's kind of politics. During the 70s and 80s, the Conservatives already had their own aggressive populist creed, Thatcherism. Yet, as it ran out of steam and the calmer but blander Blair era began, broadcasters who wanted right-wing controversialists to balance their shows discovered the RCP dysphoria. During the 90s and the noughts, the programmes such as Question Time and The Moral Maze came to depend on a Fox in particular. The Tory press soon followed suit. They loved to publish people from the supposedly left-wing backgrounds who bash the left, and who use it to stream, who use what seems like natural logic to arrive essentially at right-wing conclusions. Both were RCP skills. Eventually, Marines was noticed by the Conservatives themselves, and in 2005, with a party long out of power and desperate for new ideas, she was hired by the right-wing think tank Policy Exchange, which had recently been founded by the would-be Tory radicals, including Michael Gove and Nick Bowles. I sort of adore and am fascinated by Marina, Bowles recently told the Conservative website Conservative Home. In 2008, another opportunity opened up for her, when Johnson, who was close to Policy Exchange, was elected Mayor of London. Without much of a plan on how to govern, he hired Maritza as a deputy advisor, and then promoted her to deputy mayor for education and culture. Former colleagues remember her as diligent and efficient, qualities Johnson lacks. Like Cummings, she revered modern technology and what he calls the normal voters, who were keen to let people know that she wasn't a Conservative member. Yet, beneath her measured manner and insistence on right and left were no longer meaningful categories, she appeared dogmatic in her dislike of liberal causes such as multiculturalism and left-wing institutions such as trade unions. In 2016, Johnson stepped down as mayor, but the RCP network found another liberal phenomenon it could get behind: Brexit. Last year, Fox was elected as a Brexit Party MEP, and Spike regards Remainers with the same insatiable fury as right-wing tabloids, which is one reason why its writers can move so easily between the two. Last year, Moritz co-authored the Conservative Manifesto, in its crude but effective repercussions, and its promises to, quote, be a champion of freedom of expression and unleash the country's potential by cutting red tape where clear echoes of the RCP's network's preoccupations and polemic style. When conservatism is in a confrontational phase, as it is now, the relentless conviction of ex-leftists can turn out to be very useful. Back in the 70s, one of Thatcher's most valued advisors was the former Communist Party activist Alfred Sherman. Even Maritz's personal biography fits neatly with the themes of the current Toryism. She is a working-class northerner from Oldham. One of its constituencies has a small Labour majority, another potential red wall target for the Tories. Meanwhile, her immigration background and contrarian views on racism in 2017, she wrote on Spiked that institutionalized racism was a perception more than a reality, and made her just the right person in the government's view to set up its new Commission on Racial Equalities. If its conclusions are complacent, Johnson's record on race makes that quite likely. Her Pakistani ancestry will provide cover. Yet, in other ways, the relationship between the Tories and the RCP network has also become trickier in recent months. Spike hates the lockdown. Cummings broke the lockdown, wrote O'Neill recently. Good, welcome the sensible majority, Dom. Spike also hates government campaigners who ostensibly, which it sees as a state incursion and a war on the poor. COVID-19 threatens to make such libertarian postures seem obsolete, or at least the need for an adjustment. This week, one of the parts of the northern England were put back into partial lockdown. It was Maritz's hometown. Former colleagues predict she will try to soften such emergency measures. Johnson may be somewhat receptive to that. On Monday, he said that this new anti-obesity drive would not be excessively bossy or nannying. Though COVID-19 crisis, his emphasis on common sense, often individuals, has an echo of argument often made on Spiked that states should treat citizens as grown-ups. Yet, if the crisis worsens again, or the government's poll ratings resume their early summer fall, then Maritz and her comrades may learn the hard lessons about the Conservatives. They often seek help from outside the party. Their relationship with the RCP tells us that as orthodox Conservatives' values, such as the support for the free market capitalism, have lost their broad appeal, the Tories have become less and less squeamish about where this help comes from. But once these outside ideas and allies have been assimilated or stop being useful, the Conservatives move on. From David Cameron's coalition with the Liberal Democrats to Johnson's more furtive distance with the now RPC. Now relationships with the Tories are just not built to last. So there you have it. More interesting insight into the background of what's been going on. And of course, these are just more people that are in the background that we sort of have to worry about. I mean, it's rather insulting. Was it David Lammy? I'm pretty sure it was David Lammy who led the last report into, systemic racism in this country. He had a full report with ideas of this is what we should be doing. And instead of the government turning around and going, okay, we'll do those things, they've turned around and gone to someone who just goes, oh yeah, systemic racism, it's not real, it's just a feeling. That report is that report, when it comes out, it's going to be very interesting, because it's not going to have any conclusions on what the government should do. It's going to be a massive thing of, systemic racism, it's not a thing, people are just making it up. I'm betting that now, that is what it's going to be. And yet, we've had not just David Lammy's report, but there have been a number of reports over the recent years that have said very similar things about, yes, systemic racism does exist and here's what we need to do to fix it, the government just hasn't done anything about it. And you've got to ask why. But anyway, we'll see you all soon. Very sure. I'm sure. Yes, this is how we end the video now. Yeah, so we'll see you all soon. That's the ending part.